with Joe McClane and EmilyiAlcaraz.
Joining us right now by Zoom chat or rejoining the show is Eric Sammons, editor of Crisis Magazine. Good morning to you, Eric.
Good morning.
It's good to have you back on the program. I have to believe it was right after you were on our show that you got the gig over at Crisis. I think we're responsible for getting you that job. I'm going to take credit for it anyway, publicly.
Go ahead, take credit. But don't expect like a compensation or anything.
Oh, darn it. All right. Well, congratulations to you, and
thank you.
And hopefully that's been going very well for you so far.
It has.
Yeah, praise God. There's a lot of stories over there that I thought we could comment on with you today. I want to start with your own article that you just published, Adapting to Our Brave New World, When to Compromise and When to Fight. We just had a conversation with my colleague Dave Palmer about a story out of the University of Dallas, a professor who came under fire for making comments about people who, identify from a biological male identifying as a biological female. And there was a lot of backlash, and there was an effort to have him removed, and the university stood up to defend him. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But one of the points I wanted to bring out and get you to comment on, as Catholics, I think many of us are not going to be willing to fight those fights. I think we're more likely to go along to get along. What say you, Eric Sammons?
I think that's true as well. I think the issue is we're in an interesting time in that most of us, or at least us or our parents, we grew up in a time where Catholicism was acceptable, at least basically. Christian values were acceptable. And so we got the habit of going along with the culture because the culture was basically not that bad. But I think we see an acceleration of, we've often called it a post-Christian culture. I think we've now moved into an anti-Christian culture. Mm-hmm. And so those instincts we have to go along with the culture, which we just grew up with, are now working against us. And so I think a lot of times, sometimes it's just people who might not be faithful, whatever. But I do think a lot of times it's simply people who don't really recognize how quickly things have changed. And so they don't realize that we're very much called to be countercultural. So in the case of University of Dallas, which my daughter went to, so go UD. In the case of University of Dallas, I commend them for seeing that, yes, okay, for a long time we could kind of go along and not really have a problem with the culture, but now they're asking us to change our values, to compromise our values, and in the case of UD, to say that a man is a woman, and that would be compromising our faith. So I commend them for doing that. So I think, though, we have to break those instincts of going on with the culture and truly realize that to be Catholic today is to be truly countercultural.
Yes, but Eric, doesn't that mean suffering? I mean, because it's not.
I'm trying to avoid that part. Yeah, no, that's the bad news. Yeah, it does. I mean, it really does. But if you look at the history of Christianity, the fact is that many, many times in many cultures in history, Christians have had to suffer just to be Christian. I mean, it started like that. I mean, with the Roman Empire, the pagan Roman Empire, but we've seen it in 16th century England. We saw Catholics were persecuted. We saw it in Soviet Union. We see it today in modern China. We see it, for example, in Saudi Arabia, places like that. And I think we're starting to see it more and more here, not on the level of somewhere like Saudi Arabia, of course, yet, but it's increasing. And that does mean an increase of suffering. Now, the good news of that, and trust me, I'm one who who has a natural inclination to avoid suffering. But the good news of that is it does mean it's an opportunity for faithfulness. It's an opportunity to say, yes, I really do believe. I don't just believe because everybody else does. I don't just believe because my parents do. I don't just believe because my neighbors do. I believe even though all those other people don't. And even though it means I might lose my job, even though it means I might be ridiculed or canceled or whatever, and so those are sufferings, and there's a decent chance that those sufferings will increase, rather than decrease over time, at least in the foreseeable future. But I think that's a great calling because, I mean, that's our faith. That what did our Lord have to do? I mean, he had to suffer in order to save us, and of course, on the other side of suffering is the resurrection, and that's what we look forward to.
Eric Sammons is our guest. He's the editor of Crisis Magazine. We're having a conversation about adapting to a brave new world. about his article, which we posted a link to at facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time and the other locations as well. Real quick, we're going to have to take a break here in 2 minutes, Eric, but how many Catholics do you think, Eric, have really stopped to ponder what they are willing to do and not do in the face of scrutiny when it comes to the life issues, the marriage issues, gender issues, all of these sort of non-negotiables, as we call them, because they're intrinsic evil nature? How many Catholics do you think have ever even stopped to think about, ponder, what will they be willing to suffer for? Eric Sammons.
I think more and more are. Honestly, I think if you asked me that 2 or 3 years ago, I would say very few. It's probably still not a huge number, but I think it is increasing because we see it's creeping in on us. We see that it's more and more impacting our actual lives. It's very easy to say that's other people. That's the Catholics in China or wherever where bad things are happening, or even that's happening maybe in a city like Portland or New York or something like that. But it's not happening. Maybe let's say you live in Kansas. It's not happening here or something like that. Well, it's coming in. It's coming into everybody. And so if they're not thinking about it, they need to start thinking about it. How will you respond? And the number one way you think about it is you pray about it. You pray about it first so you have the strength when it does come into your life.
Okay, so I want to talk really quickly about the Regis Martin article, When Salvation is a Phone Call Away, mostly because it references Fulton Sheen. And anytime we can do that, I think we have a moral obligation to do so. So the article starts off, Regis starts off sort of demonstrating how Fulton Sheen would call people in this case, it was a journalist who was clearly needing some conversion. And would meet with personally and try to win their soul for Christ, and was successful in many instances, especially in the instance referenced in this article. But then he begs the question, well, then why aren't we calling President Joe Biden and calling him to conversion? Or how about any politician who's Catholic but seems to contradict church teaching and whatnot? So how do we begin to think about this as Catholics? Should we be appalled that this doesn't happen more? Does it happen and we don't know about it? Should we encourage our bishops to do this? Eric Sammons, what say you?
I think we definitely should encourage our bishops to do this. I think one of the problems is that we see politicians as these entities that aren't really people. They're almost like robots up there that we either oppose or we support. And the problem is that that's not what they are. Joe Biden is a human soul destined to be united with God. That's what he's supposed to be one day. Nancy Pelosi, the same thing. His soul is very important to God, and he wants him to convert. And so the number one role of bishops is to help us get to heaven. And so if Joe Biden is in your flock, either in Washington, D.C., or wherever his diocese is in New Jersey or wherever he's from, Delaware, I can't remember. Anyway, the point is now he's in D.C. He's living in D.C. We know that. So the Cardinal Archbishop of D.C. should be concerned first and foremost about his soul, not his policies. And obviously his policies reflect a problem with his soul. And so he should be calling him up and saying, you really need to think about your eternal salvation and how much you're endangering it. Same thing with Nancy Pelosi or any politician, Republican, Democrat, whatever, that is clearly supporting publicly things that are contrary to the faith.
It's a scandal that continues, and it's not new. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time. Nancy Pelosi's been in office for how long? I mean, so the scandal goes way back to Catholic politicians that reject outwardly established Catholic teaching based on natural law.
Right.
I guess the question is, how much fight or compromise ought we be making as Catholics here when it comes to bishops that won't make that phone call? What should we do? What's some good guidance here?
I mean, obviously, we should first and foremost pray and fast for our bishops, as much as we can. And I think we should really challenge them to put the salvation of souls first. And so, number one, the salvation of Joe Biden, his soul. But number two, the jeopardy that Joe Biden's policies and support for Joe Biden puts in the souls of Catholics. And so the scandal, as you mentioned, the grave scandal is the fact that people will think, abortion isn't a big deal. Catholics will think that because the bishops are not making it a big deal. And so, for example, that could trickle down to the fact that some young woman who maybe gets pregnant, she's 19, and she's been conditioned as a Catholic to think abortion isn't that big a deal. And she gets an abortion. She puts her soul in grave danger, the soul potentially of the father of the child, of the abortionist, of everybody involved, to maybe her parents who support it, whatever the case may be. Now we have all of a sudden all these souls who are in danger of going to hell because a bishop is either afraid of saying something, or perhaps he even supports. I don't know. I can't read the bishop's soul, but the point is that there's this trickle down effect where by refusing to confront the Joe Bidens and Nancy Pelosi's of the world, it has real world implications for real people. I mean, I know Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi are real people too, but it's much more than just their souls. It's the souls of countless people.
Yeah. And there's this other article from Crisis that was about the LGBT bishops that are, it's very difficult to see your shepherds, your bishops, who are in a sense taking the side of the culture which is becoming anti-Christian. And for example, we also saw Cardinal Supich recently saying, no, don't attack Joe Biden for not believing his Catholic faith. And it's very easy as a layperson to sit here and call out the shepherds, but I think in your article you also talk about that as lay people, no, we need to get our own houses in order first. Can you speak a little bit on that, our role?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much we can do as lay people as far as how the church is run and how bishops act. I mean, that's their responsibility, not ours, thank God. But the fact is that things do come from the bottom up in the church. I know we always think of it as the top down, the Pope and the cardinals and the bishops on down. But the fact is that long term, that's short term, but long term, it does come from the bottom up, because where do the bishops and the priests and the Pope come from? They come from the lay people. They come from families. And so the first and foremost thing we need to do is get our house in order. Are you praying up to an hour, at least an hour a day? Is your family praying together? Are you raising them in the faith? Are you making sure that your kids are getting a good education, which probably means they don't go to public schools, and it might also mean they don't go to Catholic schools, but they have to homeschool them. I mean, depending on where you live and the choices you have. And are you going to, are you praying regularly as your family? Are you fasting together? All these things, if you're not doing it, you probably should just shut up about the bishops, frankly, because you need to do that first and foremost. Because I do think, though, the problem, sometimes we go to the other extreme, though. We say you do that and you don't say anything about the bishops. No, that's not true. The foundation is this life of prayer, and then the Lord will call you to potentially speak out at times and confront your bishops and say, you need to do something. In fact, Janet Smith has a article today at Crisis where she talks about that, and she ends it by saying, please, she's basically begging the bishops to clean up their houses of the sex abuse crisis and things and of that nature. And that's a perfect example where Janet is calling them to task, but she's doing it from a basis of concern for souls and of prayer and fasting behind it.
Eric Sammons. So a question I had was about the article in regards that was written by Bishop Athanasius Snyder. In it, he talks a little bit about minor orders here. And why is it that minor orders are even being brought up right now? Because it seems as though the vast majority of people don't even know what minor orders are anymore. So what are they, and why is this a topic that we should be even concerned with right now?
That's a great question, because minor orders seem very minor right now, right?
Good one.
But I think Bishop Schneider, he recognizes, though, that these little things that happen in the church can have a great impact. And so what he sees, and he says it in his article, he sees that the abolition of minor orders, and minor orders, just for people who don't know, we know the orders in the church are the bishop and the priest and the deacon. Well, there used to be, before Paul VI in the 1970s abolished them, they were called minor orders, like lector and acolyte and porter, and I think there's a fourth one I can't remember right now, that basically a seminarian would go through before he became a priest. And so lector, for example, is those who read. Now we have lots of lay people reading because the Pope Paul VI abolished that. But what's happened is Pope Francis recently opened up those roles of lector and acolyte to women. And so And because they're not orders anymore, they were open to women, was basically his logic. But what Bishop Schneider is saying is that this is a rupture from a 2,000-year tradition. And it represents many things beyond just, okay, we don't have minor orders. Now we have women lectors and acolytes. But what it represents is a confusion of the roles of the two sexes. And I think when people show up at Mass, when kids, they grow up in Mass and they don't see that distinction between men and women, I do think that makes them later than susceptible to the culture saying men can be women, women can be men, women can do anything men can do anything women can do. And that's a lie. That men and women are fundamentally different. They're equal in their value as images of God, but they are fundamentally different. And so something like minor orders is restoring them would be a step towards allowing people, Catholics, as they grow up, to see this distinction between men and women.
We have about 2 minutes left in our conversation with Eric Sammons. Real quick, as you were saying that, and I was thinking, is this a case where it's kind of like executive orders? Every president comes in, signs 4 billion of them in the first 2 weeks, and tries to undo everything the previous administration does, but the next administration will just rinse and repeat. Is this kind of that, but on the papal level? If the next pope happens to be more traditional or orthodox or whatever you want to say, will he just begin to undo everything this current pope has done? Is it something like that?
That is how it's becoming, and I think that's a tragedy. I think that might be what happens, but I think that's awful. Because if you look at, for example, in the first millennium, the Church of Rome was seen as the vanguard, as the source of stability in the church, that they did not change. You knew, if you wanted to know what did the apostles believe, you looked to Rome, because they kept the apostolic tradition. When a lot of the Eastern bishops were falling away at times, embracing heresies, you knew Rome, you could count on Rome, they would not change. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, out of Rome is a lot of change for the sake of change, when really Rome should not change. Any development of tradition should be so slow that an individual doesn't even see it in his lifetime. Maybe when he's a kid and when he's 85 years old, he's like, oh yeah, that kind of changed a little bit, didn't it? But it's almost imperceptible. That's how tradition should develop. All
right, Eric Sammons, editor of Crisis Magazine. God love you. God bless you. Thanks for being on our show today. We'd like to have you back maybe once a month to give us the rundown on Crisis. That would be awesome.
That would be great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great day, Eric Sammons. That's going to do it for hour one of Catholic Drive Time. We'll hope you'll join us for the next hour. We're going to be live on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. You can find all those links at grnonline.com/CDT, where you can also get a free talk by Father Bill Casey called The State of the Union, the Church and Society, what you should be thinking about and where we're going. You can get that for free. Watch it right now over at grnonline.com/CDT. It's a great and powerful talk. But we're going to have the game show in the next hour. Prizes are involved, and you could win. Stick around. A lot more Catholic Drive Time still to come. God bless you. God love you. And we'll see you tomorrow, 6 a.m. Central, 7 Eastern.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.